Hello everyone, I hope you are all well and have had a really great week, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then I'm Mrs. Smith, I'm a Christian, and I usually walk about and talk about all sorts of things from a Christian point of view. But if you're a regular here, then you will know that I have really bad sciatica at the moment. In fact, I had to have an MRI scan recently to see just what's going on there. And I cannot sit, stand or walk for more than a few seconds at a time. So today you are seeing what I am seeing. I've managed to get on the sunbed in the garden, and there'll just be some ambient sounds of that, and you're literally looking at what I'm looking at because I can't do anything else. But please do bear with me. I'm hoping that the results of the scan will show that there's something that can be done, and I'm hoping that I will be back to walking and talking at some point. But I'm determined not to give in. I'm determined to keep this YouTube channel going, however difficult it is. And sometimes you might just be looking at the ceiling because that's what I'm looking at. But I'm here. And I wanted to talk to you all about something that sounds a bit strange, especially if you're not a Christian. But sometimes, even if you are, and it's the phrase, fear God. Fear God or fear of the Lord and similar phrases appear in the Christian Bible lots of times. But interestingly, phrases like do not be afraid also appear in the Bible. So what does fear God really mean? If you're not familiar with the phrase fear God, it might sound a bit alarming. You might be thinking, hang on a minute, why would I want to follow a God I'm supposed to be afraid of? Or maybe the phrase fear God makes you picture God as some kind of angry teacher in the sky who is waiting for you to mess up just so that he can have a go at you. And to be honest, I'm sure that's how a lot of people think when they hear the phrase fear God. But I want to assure you that that's not what it means at all. In the Bible, fearing God isn't about being terrified of him. It's actually much closer to being filled with awe or respect or wonder. I just want to unpack that a little bit. So I want you to imagine for me that you're standing at the edge of the sea during a massive thunderstorm. The waves are huge. The wind is howling. There is lightning and crashes of thunder. And suddenly you realise just how small and insignificant you are. And you're thinking, wow. You recognise and respect the power of that sea and the storms. You recognise that they're much bigger than you are and that they could even swallow you up. And that is much closer to what the Christian Bible means by fearing God. It's not us cowering in a corner. It's us recognising who God is. It's understanding that God is greater than we are, greater even than that sea and that storm, greater than our problems, greater than our achievements, greater than anything in the world. And if we really think about that for a minute, it can be quite humbling. I personally think we've lost a bit of that humbling reality in our culture today because we live in a world that tells us that we are at the centre of everything. We're encouraged to build our own truth, follow our own path, do whatever feels right to us. But then God comes along and says, actually, I'm God and you're not. And that's a humbling thought. But strangely, it's also a freeing one, because if I'm not God, then I don't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, right? And that's probably a good thing, actually, because I struggle to even run a diary these days. I can barely remember why I went into a room half the time. So imagine putting someone like me in charge of the whole world. The Christian Bible says in the book of Proverbs in chapter 9 and verse 10, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And in Proverbs, again, chapter 1 and verse 7, I think it is, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So in other words, wisdom and knowledge start when we realise that we're not the smartest, not the best, or not the strongest person in existence. So I guess then that knowledge and wisdom start when we become more teachable. Think about it for a minute. The person who thinks they know everything can learn nothing. So Fearing God is recognizing that maybe God knows things that we don't. Maybe his wisdom is greater than ours. Maybe his perspective is a bit better than someone who can't see what the future really holds. However, there's another side to all of this. Because if fearing God was only about recognizing his power and how big and strong he is, we'd have a problem. Because power and strength on their own can be quite frightening. A hurricane is powerful. A lion is powerful. But they're also really dangerous, right? But the Bible doesn't just say that God is powerful and strong and knowledgeable. It says that God is loving, and that's what makes the difference here. So imagine a small child holding their parent's hand while crossing a busy road. The child trusts their parent. They know their parent is in charge. So they're not terrified of that road. And they're not terrified of their parent. Why? Because they trust them. And they know that that parent loves them and will stay with them and will help them crossing that road. And whatever happens, their parent won't leave them. They know they're being looked after, right? And that's a much closer idea of fearing God in the Bible. God isn't asking people to live in terror of him. He's inviting them into a relationship with him built on love and trust. A relationship where we recognise both his greatness and his goodness at the same time. And honestly, that's something many people misunderstand about Christianity. Christianity isn't about trying to keep God happy. It's not about nervously wondering whether you've done enough good deeds this week. The central message of Christianity is that God loves us so much that he came to us in the form of Jesus. And, Jesus didn't spend his time terrifying people, did he? He healed people, he forgave people, he welcomed people. He went and ate meals with people that everyone else had written off. He loved people. He accepted people. And those who were the most comfortable around Jesus were sometimes those who thought that they were the furthest away from God. The way Jesus behaved wasn't the character of someone trying to scare everyone into obedience. It was the behaviour of someone trying to lovingly lead and guide people that he cared about. So why does the Bible use the word fear at all? Well, it uses it in different contexts, but sometimes the English language doesn't help us when we're trying to figure out what the Bible is saying. If you look at the original Hebrew word for fear, it can mean to fear, yes, but it can also mean to revere, to respect deeply, to stand in awe of. In the Old Testament, in the Bible, the Hebrew word for fear is yirah. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I will put it up on the screen for you. Yirah, that's the Hebrew word in the Old Testament in the Bible for fear. And it's often describing a deep respect and recognition of God's greatness rather than being terrified of him. And in the New Testament, the main Greek word for fear is phobos. Again, I'll put that on the screen for you. I know I'm saying that one right. And this is actually where we get the word phobia. And it can mean fear, but it can also mean reverence and awe. So as I said, the meaning of the word fear in the Bible depends on the context. For example, when Jesus calms a storm and the disciples realise just who he is, they are filled with phobos. There is a little bit of fear there, but there's also astonishment and awe at being in the presence of God's power. I don't like flying, but I do it sometimes when I want to go on holiday, right? And it frightens me a little bit because of the greatness of it, the massive plane, this really heavy thing that's staying in the sky seems to be a miracle, and I'm wondering why we don't just drop out of the sky. I know the science behind it, but what I'm saying is it does terrify me, but at the same time I'm thinking, This is incredible. Wow. In modern English today, fear usually means something like I'm scared something bad is going to happen. But in biblical language, when speaking about God, it often meant I recognise God's greatness, his authority, his holiness, his power, and I respond with awe, with respect, and with humility. The kind of feeling you get when you stand beneath a sky full of stars, and suddenly you realise the universe is much, much bigger than you thought it was. The kind of feeling that makes you stop talking for a minute and simply admire creation. That's what fearing God looks like. It's standing before the creator of everything and saying, wow. And here's the rub. The more we understand who God really is, the less reason we have to be afraid of him. Because the God who created the universe is also the God who knows your name. He's also the God who knows every single thing about you. The God who made the stars, it's also the God who is interested in the details of your life, your worries, your struggles, your questions, and even your doubts. So, if you've always thought that Christianity was about living in fear of God, I would really encourage you to rethink that. The Bible's invitation isn't be terrified. The Bible's invitation is see God for who he really is, a God who is greater than you ever imagined, more powerful than you ever imagined, but also more loving than you ever imagined. And when those truths come together, something amazing happens. That fear becomes awe and wonder. Distance becomes closeness, and mere religion becomes relationship. So the Bible isn't telling us to be frightened of God. It's telling us that when God is big in our lives, everything else becomes a little less frightening. Thank you so much for joining me today and sticking with me, even though what you're looking at probably isn't very interesting. And if you've got any thoughts or questions on this subject, then I would love to hear them in those comments. And if you enjoy my videos generally, then please do hit that like and subscribe button for me. It will really, really help me out. But until next time, please take care and God bless you all. Bye.